You know that moment when you realize your plants are actually dying, and it's totally your fault? Yeah, that was me 3 months ago, standing in my garden at 6 in the morning, coffee in hand, staring at what used to be my pride and joy. My tomatoes looked like they'd given up on life. The leaves were pale, yellow at the edges, growth had just stopped completely, and honestly, I was ready to rip everything out and start over. I'd spent weeks trying to figure out what was wrong. I checked for pests, nothing. I adjusted my watering schedule, no change. I moved some plants to get better sun exposure, still nothing. I even bought 3 different types of fertilizer from the garden center, and somehow things got worse. At this point I was convinced I just didn't have a green thumb and maybe I should stick to buying vegetables at the farmer's market like a normal person. But here's the thing, I didn't have bad soil when I started. I didn't have a pest problem, I didn't even have a watering issue. What I had was dead soil, and I didn't even know that was a thing until my neighbor, who's been gardening for like 30 years, came over one morning and basically told me my dirt was lifeless. I remember her kneeling down, picking up a handful of my soil, and just shaking her head. She crumbled it between her fingers and said, "When's the last time you saw a worm in here?" And I realized I couldn't remember. She asked me when I'd last seen the soil look rich and dark, and again, I had no answer. It had been months. She said something that stuck with me. She said, "Your soil isn't feeding your plants anymore, because nothing's alive in there to break down nutrients. It's like trying to run a restaurant with no kitchen staff. You can have all the ingredients in the world, but if nobody's cooking, nobody's eating." That analogy hit different. I'd been so focused on the plants themselves, on what I could see above ground, that I completely ignored what was happening below. The foundation of everything was broken, and I was just throwing random solutions at the symptoms. That's when she told me about this trick she'd been using for years. It sounded too simple to work, but I was desperate. She told me that if I wanted to see my plants bounce back, I needed to wake up the soil, not just feed the plants. And she said it could happen fast, like within 24 hours, you'd start seeing the soil change. I was skeptical. I mean, how do you revive dirt overnight? But she explained it in a way that actually made sense, and that's what I want to share with you today, because if you're dealing with struggling plants and nothing seems to work, this might be exactly what you need to hear. So, here's what was actually going on in my garden, and my neighbor broke this down for me in a way that finally made everything click. When soil is healthy, it's not just dirt, it's this whole living ecosystem. There are millions, actually billions, of tiny organisms in just a handful of good soil. We're talking bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, all these microscopic things working together to break down organic matter and turn it into food that plants can actually use. It's like this underground city that never sleeps, constantly processing and recycling nutrients. When that system shuts down, either because the soil dried out too much, or because it got compacted, or because you've been using the wrong fertilizers that killed everything off, your plants can't eat anymore. It doesn't matter how much you water them or how much sun they get. They're literally starving because the soil can't process nutrients. The nutrients might be there sitting in the soil, but they're locked up in forms the plants can't absorb. My neighbor explained that most people think fertilizer is food for plants, but really, good fertilizer is food for the soil. You're feeding those microorganisms, giving them what they need to multiply and get back to work. And when you use the right kind of organic nutrients, especially ones that are already broken down and easy for microbes to use, they wake up fast. They start reproducing, they start eating, and they start making nutrients available again. She compared it to adding yeast to bread dough. You're introducing active organisms into an environment where they can thrive, and once conditions are right, they multiply incredibly fast. That's what happens when you add the right organic fertilizer to tired soil. She told me about this fertilizer she'd been using called Fancy Chicken. It's made from chicken manure, but it's processed in a way that makes it perfect for this kind of situation. The nutrients are already in a form that soil microbes love, so they don't have to work as hard to break everything down. They can get active really quickly and start doing their job almost immediately. The other critical part of the trick is moisture. Those microbes need water to function. If your soil is too dry, they basically go to sleep, become dormant. They're still there, but they're not active. If it's too wet, they can't get oxygen, and they die off. So the trick is to add the organic fertilizer and then water it in properly. Not too much, not too little, just enough to create the right environment. You want the soil moist but not soggy, with enough air pockets for oxygen to reach those microbes. She said, do this in the evening, and by the next morning, your soil will already be different. The microbes will be active again. Give it 24 hours, and you'll see your plants respond because suddenly they can access nutrients again. I didn't really believe it would work that fast, but I figured, what did I have to lose? My plants were already dying. So, I did exactly what she said. I went and got some fancy chicken fertilizer that same afternoon. I remember standing in the garden store, looking at all the different options, and thinking about how many times I'd been here before trying to fix this problem. But this time felt different because I actually understood what I was trying to do. I wasn't just feeding plants anymore. I was trying to bring my soil back to life. I got home and started working around 5 in the evening. I spread the fancy chicken around my plants. Not too thick, just a good layer on top of the soil. My neighbor had told me to work it in lightly around the roots, so I used my hands to gently mix it into the top couple inches of soil. I could already tell the texture was different from the chemical fertilizers I'd been using. It felt more natural, more like something that belonged in the soil. Then came the watering part, and this is where I'd messed up so many times before. I used to either barely water things or completely flood them. But this time, I watered slowly and thoroughly, making sure the water soaked in deep but wasn't creating puddles or running off. I wanted that fertilizer to get down into the root zone where it could start working. The whole process took me about an hour for my whole garden. This was around 7 in the evening when I finished. I went inside, had dinner, watched some TV, tried not to think about it too much. But I'll be honest, I barely slept that night. I kept thinking about what my neighbor said, about seeing changes in 24 hours. Part of me thought she was exaggerating, using gardener's optimism. But another part of me was hopeful for the first time in weeks. I woke up at 5:30 the next morning, way before my alarm. I didn't even make coffee first. I just walked straight outside in my pajamas. The soil looked different. I know that sounds weird, but it did. It looked darker, richer somehow, like it had more depth to it. When I knelt down and touched it, it had this perfect texture, not dusty and dry like it had been, but not muddy either. It had this springiness to it, this life. It felt alive, if that makes any sense. I grabbed a handful and squeezed it, and it held together but crumbled easily when I poked it. That's what good soil is supposed to feel like. And I hadn't felt that in my garden in months. But the real change came later that day. I checked on things throughout the morning, trying not to hover too much. By afternoon, I started noticing small things. Some of the tomato leaves that had been curled up were starting to flatten out. By evening, about 24 hours after I'd put down the fertilizer, I started seeing things I hadn't seen in weeks. Some of the tomato plants had new growth at the tips, these little bright green shoots. The leaves that had been drooping were starting to lift up toward the sun. The color was coming back. That deep green color, that means a plant is actually healthy. Over the next few days, it got even better. New leaves started coming in darker green than anything I'd seen before, almost like they were overcompensating for lost time. The plants that had basically stalled out, that hadn't grown at all, in weeks, started growing again. I could measure the difference day by day. Within a week, I had flowers showing up on plants that I thought would never flower again. Within 2 weeks, I was seeing fruit set. Actual little tomatoes forming. I could not believe that the turnaround started so fast. And it wasn't just the tomatoes. I tried it on my peppers, my herbs, even some flowers that were struggling, and the same thing happened every time. That 24-hour mark seemed to be the turning point for everything. So, why does this work? After seeing the results, I became kind of obsessed with understanding the science behind it. I did some reading, talked to my neighbor more, watched some videos from soil scientists, and it all comes down to this idea of microbial activation. When you add something like fancy chicken to tired soil, you're giving those microorganisms everything they need to multiply really quickly. The nutrients are already broken down into simpler forms, so the microbes don't have to work as hard to process them. That means they can reproduce faster and get back to doing their job of making nutrients available to plants. It's like the difference between giving someone ingredients they have to cook versus giving them a meal that's ready to eat. They can use that energy immediately. The moisture balance is huge too. You're creating the perfect environment for that microbial life to explode in population. When soil has the right moisture level, and you add quality organic nutrients, those microbe populations can double every few hours. Within 24 hours, you can go from a relatively dead soil to one that's teeming with life. And when that happens, your plants can suddenly access all these nutrients that were locked up in the soil, unavailable before. What I love about fancy chicken specifically is that it's formulated for exactly this kind of overnight wake-up effect. It's not some slow-release thing where you wait weeks to see results. The way it's processed means everything in it is ready to support microbial life immediately. It brings soil life back fast because everything in it is ready to go to work the moment it gets wet. The other thing I learned is that this isn't a one-time fix. Healthy soil needs to be maintained. Those microbes need consistent food to stay active. But once you get that microbial life thriving again, it's way easier to keep it going. I use fancy chicken every few weeks now, just lighter applications to keep everything active and happy. My soil stays that rich dark color, it stays soft and crumbly, and most importantly my plants stay healthy. I also learned to read my soil better. Now I can tell when it's starting to lose life again. The color starts to fade, it gets harder, it doesn't smell as earthy. When I see those signs, I know it's time for another application before things get bad. My garden went from something I was embarrassed about to something I'm actually proud of again. People stop and ask me questions now. My neighbor jokes that I became the student who surpassed the teacher. And it all started with understanding that I wasn't just feeding plants, I was feeding soil. That shift in thinking changed everything. If your plants are struggling and you can't figure out why, check your soil. If it looks dead, if it's dusty or hard or just doesn't look right, try this trick. Get some good organic fertilizer like fancy chicken, water it in properly, and give it 24 hours. You might be amazed at what happens. I've seen it work on vegetables, flowers, herbs, even struggling houseplants that I brought outside and treated. Trust me, your plants will thank you, and you'll actually enjoy gardening again, instead of just watching things slowly die. That feeling of bringing something back to life, of understanding what was wrong and fixing it, that's what got me hooked on gardening all over again. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.